On January 10th, 2025, San Francisco was engulfed in flames. Smoke filled the sky, the sun turned bloodshot, and ash was entering my lungs. I, a 25-year-old barista named Max, woke up to the sound of sirens and saw the city being consumed by fire. But in the midst of the chaos, there he was, Jackie Chan, not a movie star, but a real hero who threw himself into the inferno to save people. That day turned my life around. My name's Max Wilson, a 25-year-old barista scraping by in San Francisco's Mission District. January 10th, 2025 started like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I jolted awake to the wail of sirens piercing through the thin walls of my cramped rental. The air was wrong, thick, acrid, like someone had set a bonfire in my lungs. I stumbled to the window, and that's when I saw it. The sky was gone. A choking blanket of smoke had swallowed it whole, turning the morning sun into a dull, blood-red smear. Ash drifted down like snow, coating the street outside. The wildfire that had been gnawing at the mountains for days had finally reached the city. I rubbed sleep from my eyes, heart pounding as the distant thrum of helicopters grew louder. It wasn't just a sound, it was a warning. Down the block, I could see my neighbors scrambling. Mrs. Rivera, the old lady who always tipped me in quarters, was shoving a suitcase into her beat-up sedan. A guy I recognized from the corner store bolted past, yelling into his phone. Panic was spreading faster than the flames. I grabbed my phone, text from coworkers, all caps, fire's close. Get out now. But where was I supposed to go? This tiny house, with its creaky floors and chipped paint, was all I had. My coffee shop, Brew Haven, was my life. Leaving felt like abandoning a piece of myself. I threw on a hoodie and stepped outside. The heat hit me like a slap, even though the flames were still blocks away. The wind howled, carrying embers that danced in the air like fireflies from hell. Sirens screamed from every direction, blending into a chaotic symphony. I coughed, pulling my shirt over my nose, and watched as a pickup truck peeled out, tires screeching. People were fleeing, but I couldn't move. My feet were glued to the porch, eyes locked on the horizon where black smoke billowed up from the hills. It was mesmerizing and terrifying, like watching the end of the world creep closer. Then I heard it, a crash followed by a shout. Across the street, a car had slammed into a hydrant, water gushing uselessly into the gutter. The driver stumbled out, dazed, while a woman screamed at him to hurry. I should have run over to help, but my legs wouldn't budge. Fear had me in a chokehold. That's when I saw the first flames, a flickering orange glow licking the rooftops a few streets over. It was moving fast, too fast. The wind wasn't just fanning it, it was throwing it at us like a weapon. I darted back inside, grabbing what I could, a backpack, my wallet, the keys to Brew Haven. My hand shook as I stuffed a photo of my mom into the bag, the only thing I had left of her. Outside, the noise had escalated. Car horns, shouting, the crackle of something burning. I stepped onto the porch again, and that's when I realized how bad it was. The air was heavier now, stinging my eyes. A plume of smoke rose from the direction of a shop. My chest tightened. Was it gone already? I couldn't think straight. All I knew was that my San Francisco, was turning to ash, and I was standing there, useless, watching it happen. The street was a madhouse. Cars honked, people yelled, and the smoke thickened, clawing at my throat. I stood on my porch, backpack slung over one shoulder, frozen as San Francisco burned around me. The flames were closer now, their orange tongues flickering between houses just a few blocks away. I could hear glass shattering somewhere, probably from the heat. My phone buzzed, another text. Max, leave now. But I couldn't. Not yet. Then, through the haze, I saw him. A figure moved fast, cutting through the chaos like he owned it. He wore a worn leather jacket, dark pants, and a cap pulled low. At first, I thought he was a firefighter, someone official, but he had no gear, no badge. Just purpose. He darted to a house across the street, where smoke was pouring from the windows. A dog barked inside, frantic. The guy didn't hesitate. He kicked the door open, vanishing into the gray, and seconds later emerged with the mud in his arms, coughing but calm. He handed it to a sobbing kid, then turned to help Mrs. Rivera, who was struggling with her suitcase. Move quick, he shouted, voice steady despite the madness. I squinted through the smoke. His face, sharp jaw, intense eyes, felt familiar, but my brain couldn't place it. Adrenaline kicked in, and I jogged over. "Hey, need a hand?" I rasped, coughing into my sleeve. He glanced at me, nodded once, and pointed to a pickup stalled in the road. "Help them load up." I didn't argue. Together, we hauled bags and a crate of bottled water into the truck bed while the driver, a guy with wild hair, fumbled with the keys. The man in the jacket moved like he'd done this 100 times, precise, no wasted effort. Then it hit me. That voice, that stance. I'd heard it in movies, seen it on screen. "Wait, Jackie Chan," I blurted, dumbstruck. He shot me a quick look, a faint smirk tugging at his lips, but didn't answer. No time for autographs. This wasn't Hollywood. This was real. "Come on," he barked, already heading toward Brew Haven, my coffee shop. Smoke was curling up from its roof. My stomach dropped. No, I started, but he was already moving, waving me to follow. We reached the shop, and I froze again. The front window was cracked, heat warping the glass. Inside, I heard a scream, a kid's voice. Jackie didn't pause. He grabbed a chair from the sidewalk, smashed the window, and climbed through like it was nothing. I snapped out of it and followed, glass crunching under my sneakers. The air inside was suffocating, a mix of burnt coffee and melting plastic. Through the haze, I saw him, a teenage busboy, Tommy, trapped under a fallen shelf. "Hold on," he yelled, rusing over. Jackie got there first, lifting the shelf with a grunt. "Pull him out," he ordered. I grabbed Tommy's arms, dragging him free as he coughed and wheezed. We stumbled back outside, Tommy clinging to me. Jackie scanned the street, eyes sharp. "More people need help," he said, already moving. I caught my breath, staring at him. Jackie Chan, the Jackie Chan, wasn't just some action star. He was here, in my burning city, saving lives like it was his job. And somehow I was part of it now. Sirens wailed closer, but the fire roared louder. Whatever came next, I knew one thing. This guy wasn't stopping, and I wasn't either. The street outside Brew Haven was a war zone. Smoke stung my eyes as I steadied Tommy, the teenage busboy we just pulled from the wreckage. He was shaking, coughing into his sleeve, but alive. Jackie Chan stood a few feet away, scanning the chaos with that same unshakable focus. Flames roared closer, devouring houses down the block, their crackling drowned out only by the shrieks of sirens and the chop of helicopter blades overhead. San Francisco was choking, and we were right in the middle of it. I thought we'd keep moving, helping whoever we could, but Jackie had other plans. He grabbed my arm, pulling me aside as a fire truck screamed past. "Listen, Max," he said, his voice low, cutting through the noise. "How do you know my name?" No time to ask. "There's a bigger problem. Follow me." Before I could process, he took off, weaving through the panicked crowd. Neighbors hauling kids, dragging suitcases, abandoning cars in gridlock. I hesitated, glancing at Tommy. "Go to the evac center," I yelled, pointing down the street. He nodded weakly and stumbled off. I turned and ran after Jackie, my heart hammering. What could be worse than this? He led me 3 blocks north, toward an old industrial stretch near the edge of the Mission District. The air was hotter here, the smoke so thick I could barely see 10 feet ahead. We stopped at a chain-link fence surrounding a rundown warehouse, its windows boarded up, walls tagged with faded graffiti. Embers floated down like glowing rain, and I swear I heard the fire hiss as it chewed through the dry brush nearby. Jackie crouched, peering through the fence. "In there," he said, pointing. "Explosives. Old stockpile. Dynamite, maybe worse. If the fire hits it, this whole district's gone." My stomach lurched. "What? How do you even—" I started, but he cut me off with a sharp look. Heard it from a guy at the evac point. No time to explain. His tone was clipped, urgent. I stared at the warehouse, mind racing. An explosion that size could flatten half the mission, maybe more. Thousands of people, Mrs. Rivera, Tommy, everyone, gone in a flash. "We've got to stop it," I said, voice trembling. Jackie nodded, already prying at the fence. "Help me." We tore a gap in the chain link, metal scraping my hands as I squeezed through. The warehouse loomed ahead, its rusted door hanging ajar. But as we crept closer, I heard voices gruff, angry. Shadows moved inside. Jackie held up a hand, signaling me to stop. I peeked through a crack in the wall. 3 guys, big, scruffy, armed with crowbars and a shotgun, stood around a stack of wooden crates. One kicked at a box, laughing. "This stuff's ours now. Let the fire take the rest." Marauders. Looters. Profiting off the chaos while the city burned. Jackie's jaw tightened. "Stay here," he whispered, slipping into the shadows like a ghost. I wanted to argue, but my mouth was dry, fear pinning me in place. Seconds later, I heard a thud, then a yelp. One of the looters hit the ground out cold. The other two spun around, weapons raised. "Who's there?" the shotgun guy snarled. Jackie answered with action. Leaping from behind a crate, he knocked the crowbar from the second guy's hand with a spinning kick, then ducked as the shotgun blasted a hole in the wall. Wood splinters flew, and I flinched, hard in my throat. "Get the boxes!" Jackie shouted at me, dodging a wild swing. I bolted inside, adrenaline overriding panic. The crates were heavy, stamped with faded warnings. Danger. Explosives. Sweat stung my eyes as I dragged one toward the door. Behind me, Jackie flipped the shotgun guy over his shoulder, slamming him into the concrete. The third looter lunged, but Jackie sidestepped, tripping him into a pile of debris. It was like watching one of his movies, fast, fluid, unreal, but this was no stunt. This was life or death. I hauled the crate outside, coughing as smoke poured in from the approaching fire. Jackie emerged, dragging the last looter by the collar before dropping him. "More inside," I gasped. He nodded grimly. "Enough to level everything." The flames were closing in, heat searing my skin. We had minutes, maybe less. "We can't move at all," I said, panic rising. Jackie scanned the warehouse, then pointed to a rusty water tank in the corner. "Put it down. Buy time." It wasn't a fix, but it was something. We ran back in, the roar of the fire deafening, knowing one spark could end us both. The warehouse was a furnace. Heat pressed against my skin as I stumbled toward the water tank, its rusted surface slick with condensation. Smoke burned my lungs, and the roar of the fire outside was a beast clawing at the walls. Jackie was right behind me, his face streaked with soot, eyes locked on the crates of dynamite stacked in the center of the room. The flames hadn't reached us yet, but they were close, too close. I could hear the crackle of burning timber through the shattered windows, see embers drifting in like fiery moths. If those explosives went off, San Francisco wouldn't just lose the Mission District. It'd lose everything. I yanked at the tank's valve, my hands slippery with sweat. It groaned but didn't budge. "Come on," I growled, slamming my shoulder into it. Jackie darted over, grabbing a crowbar one of the looters had dropped. With a quick jab, he wedged it under the valve and twisted. A hiss erupted, then a weak stream of water sputtered out, splashing onto the concrete. "More!" he barked, cranking harder. The pipe shuddered, and suddenly water gushed, soaking the crates. It wasn't much, but might slow the heat from setting off the dynamite. "Might. We've got to move these," I shouted, dragging a crate toward the door. My arms screamed, the weight pulling at every muscle. Jackie grabbed another, his movements swift despite the chaos. We hauled them outside, one by one, piling them near the fence. The fire was a wall of orange now, licking the warehouse's edge, the heat so intense it felt like my eyebrows were singeing. I tripped, the crate tumbling from my grip, and for a split second I saw it. Red stick spilling out, fuses glinting. My breath caught. One spark and we were done. Jackie yanked me up. "Keep going." His voice cut through my panic. We raced back inside, the air growing thicker, hotter. The looters were still out cold, sprawled where he'd left them, but I didn't care about them. All I could think about was the ticking clock in my head. Then I saw it. A flicker of flame creeping through a busted window, curling toward the remaining crates. "Jackie!" I yelled, pointing. He spun, assessed, and bolted for the tank, dragging the hose with him. Water sprayed wildly as he aimed it at the fire, dousing the sparks before they could kiss the dynamite. But it wasn't enough. A low groan echoed through the warehouse. The roof was giving way. Beams creaked, then snapped, raining debris. I dove behind a crate as a chunk of ceiling crashed down, missing me by inches. Dust choked the air, and I coughed, eyes streaming. "Jackie, we've got to go," I screamed. He didn't answer. Through the haze, I saw him wrestling with the last crate, trying to drag it clear. The fire surged, a tongue of flame licking the wall behind him. "Leave it," I shouted, scrambling toward him. He shook his head, stubborn as hell. "One more," he grunted, heaving the crate. Then it happened. A spark hit the floor, igniting a puddle of spilled fuel from the looter's gear. A whoosh, and flames shot up, racing toward the dynamite. Time slowed. I lunged, tackling Jackie as the fire roared past us. We hit the ground hard, rolling behind a metal shelf. "The wires," he yelled, spotting a tangle of fuses on the crate. I didn't think, just grabbed a shard of glass from the floor and slashed at them, hands shaking, cutting until the last one snapped. A deafening boom shook the warehouse. Not the full blast, but something smaller. The fuel had ignited, sending a fireball up the wall. Shrapnel flew, a piece grazing my arm, hot and sharp. I yelped, clutching it as Jackie pulled me to my feet. The dynamite hadn't gone off. Not yet, but the roof was collapsing, beams crashing around us. "Out, now!" he roared, shoving me toward the door. We sprinted, dodging falling debris, the heat searing my back. The warehouse groaned like a dying animal as we burst through the exit, tumbling onto the scorched ground outside. I gasped for air, the world spinning. Behind us, a second explosion rocked the building. Smaller still, just the fuel and debris, not the dynamite. The water had held, barely. Flames swallowed the warehouse, but the big blast didn't come. We'd done it. Jackie slumped beside me, breathing hard, his jacket singed. "You okay?" he asked, voice rough. I nodded, too stunned to speak. Blood trickled down my arm, but I was alive. The mission was alive. Sirens wailed closer, firefighters finally breaking through the chaos. We'd bought them time, maybe enough to save the city. The world was quiet for a moment, or maybe my ears were just ringing. I lay on the scorched ground outside the warehouse, chest heaving, the taste of smoke and blood bitter on my tongue. Jackie Chan crouched beside me, his breathing ragged but steady, his leather jacket torn at the shoulder. The warehouse was a pyre now, flames clawing at the sky, but the dynamite hadn't blown. No earth-shattering kaboom, no flattened mission district, just fire and ruin confined to that crumbling shell. We'd stopped the worst of it. Barely. I pushed myself up, wincing as pain shot through my arm where shrapnel had grazed me. Blood stained my sleeve, but it wasn't deep, just a jagged reminder of how close we'd come. Jackie glanced at it, then at me. "You're tough, Max," he said, a faint grin breaking through the soot on his face. I laughed, weak and shaky. "Yeah, right. You did the heavy lifting." He shrugged, brushing it off like it was nothing, but I saw the exhaustion in his eyes. The guy had fought looters, dodged flames, and hauled explosives, all without breaking that calm, quiet resolve. Sirens screamed closer, red lights flashing through the haze. Firefighters swarmed the street, hoses blasting at the inferno. The wind had shifted, pushing the wildfire back toward the hills, giving them a fighting chance. I staggered to my feet, leaning on Jackie for a second as the adrenaline ebbed, leaving me hollow. The mission district stretched out before us, half of it ash, half still standing. Brew Haven was gone. I knew that without looking. My little coffee shop, my life's work, reduced to cinders. But I was alive. People were alive. That had to count for something. We stumbled toward the evac center a few blocks south, a school gym packed with survivors. The air was cooler there, the smoke thinner, though it still clung to everything, clothes, hair, hope. Volunteers handed out water and blankets, their faces grim but determined. I saw Tommy, the busboy, sitting on a cot, wrapped in a foil blanket. He waved weakly, and I nodded back, relief washing over me. Mrs. Rivera was there too, fussing over her suitcase like it held the world. It probably did for her. Jackie didn't stop. He grabbed a crate of water bottles from a truck and started passing them out, moving through the crowd with that same quiet purpose. People murmured his name. Some recognized him, some didn't, but he didn't care. A woman with tear-streaked cheeks grabbed his arm, sobbing thanks for pulling her cat from a burning apartment earlier. He just nodded, said, "You're okay now," and kept going. I joined him, handing out blankets, my hands still trembling from the warehouse. It felt good to move, to help, even if my body begged me to collapse. By noon, the fire was contained, at least in the city. The hills still burned, a distant glow against the gray sky, but the immediate threat had passed. The gym buzzed with stories. A guy who'd lost his store but saved his dog, a kid who'd run back for a photo of his grandma. And Jackie's name kept coming up. "He carried my son out," one man said. "Pulled me from the car," another added. "He was everywhere. It seemed a shadow in the smoke who'd touched every life here. But he dodged the praise, slipping to a corner to sort supplies, avoiding the growing crowd. I watched him from across the room, a lump in my throat. He'd turned chaos into something bearable, not with speeches or stunts, but with action, small, steady moves that held us together. A woman approached him, her voice breaking as she thanked him for her kid. He smiled, soft and tired, and said, "You saved each other. I just helped." That stuck with me. Heroism wasn't loud or flashy. It was this: quiet, unglamorous, real. As dusk fell, the gym settled into an uneasy calm. People shared food, crackers, granola bars, piecing together normalcy from the wreckage. I sat on the floor, back against the wall, when I noticed Jackie grab his cap and head for the door. "No would-be, no fanfare." I scrambled up, weaving through the crowd. "Hey," I called, catching him outside. He turned, the fading light catching the lines on his face. "You're leaving?" I asked. He nodded. "Work's done here. You got this now." I opened my mouth to argue, but he was already walking away, disappearing into the twilight like he'd never been there. I stood there, the weight of the day crashing down. San Francisco was scarred, my shop gone, my neighborhood a ghost town, but we'd survived. Because of him. Because of us. I went back inside, joining the volunteers. We'd rebuild, somehow. And every time I'd hear Jackie Chan's name, on a screen or in a story, I'd see that day, fire, fear, and a man who showed me what it meant to keep going, no matter the odds.